So, Twitter's lost a few employees. I've seen a lot of people on the online talking about how these Twitter employees had it coming. They had all these perks in their offices, and all they did all day was drink their coffee and go to meetings and barely work and work from home. And when they're working from home, they're not even really working from home. And so they had it coming. They should all get fired by the big billionaire. Now, it doesn't take a genius to know this is in bad faith. A lot of people are just projecting political opinions onto Twitter employees, thinking that Twitter employees are the embodiment of the woke left or something. Anyway, tech employees are typically paid well. Yes. Tech employees typically get a lot of perks that you don't see in other workplaces. Yes. Also, those perks are not a pension, and they don't actually help. Tech workers are still laborers, and other laborers wanting tech workers to be punished for having a decent quality of life, kind of, are just class traders. I am a tech worker. I make a decent income. That's very nice. I also sell my labor for money, and I generate millions upon millions of dollars of income for my employers. And what do I get in return? A fraction, a tiny fraction of the value that I'm producing. It is the same as any other employee who sells their labor for a salary. It just happens to be that the scale of the industry that I'm working in is so ridiculously overinflated and massive that they can stand to pay their employees decently high salaries. And I work from home, but if I worked in the office, I would get a few extra perks, like maybe some free food on certain days or some decent coffee. But you know what I don't get? A pension. You know what I do have to do? Stash money away in tax-advantaged accounts in the hopes that someday I'll be able to retire. Because of my halfway capable salary, I actually have more of a path towards potential retirement than other people in the country. But the only reason I am even looking at that path is because of basically stock market gambles and the fact that I don't intend to have children. That is not a sustainable economy. And that is not a reason to be jealous of other people who are in the same working class as you. A ping pong table in your office is not a perk. Access to a high-yield credit union is a perk. To try to deal with the epidemic of mental health issues in this country, I get a free subscription to a commercialized meditation app. That's one of my perks. Wow. Now, there's a large caveat here. The tech industry is overinflated and extremely bloated. I absolutely agree with the assessment that many tech companies, many Silicon Valley tech companies especially, have overhired to an insane degree, and they now have to go back and tighten their belts and lay off a bunch of people. That sucks, and it's not the workers' fault. It is entirely the fault of VC investors and over-aggressive CEOs. These supposed titans of industry couldn't see that they were in a massive bubble, and they thought that the tailwinds from COVID would just carry them forever. And then they just shit the bed when they realized that, oops, we hired like 50% of our workforce over the past year, and now there's an economic turndown. But how could this happen? The money tap never turns off. There's way too much money in tech VC. It's out of control. In my experience in the mandatory assistance of interviewing and hiring way too many people, a lot of the candidates came down to one of two categories. One, they came from a FANG company, FANG being Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, or Google. Two, they weren't really qualified to be working this position, but we really needed to fill some seats, so hey, maybe just lower the bar a little bit. I don't want to dunk on people. I don't want to rip on anybody in particular. There is not really a category of person that I'm talking about here. It's just generally there's a big need for highly skilled, very specifically thoughtful people who can work in a very specific productive way. And there's a massive lack of people who actually have the training needed to deliver on the results that these companies are wishing that they were getting from the employees that they're hiring. And that is still not on the employee. That is on the employer for not setting people up for success and not hiring the people who they need to hire. It is always a race in the tech world. It is always a race to the finish, and filling seats is typically more important than filling them with the right person. Unless, of course, it's a C or D level position, a CEO or director or something, then we take a lot of time and make sure to pay a lot of money towards someone who's got pedigree, so that they can launch half of a feature and move on to their next C or D level gig. So do I think that these companies that are laying off a bunch of people should be laying them off? No, I don't think they should be laying them off. I think they shouldn't have hired all these people to begin with. A lot of the people who are being laid off right now were hired within this year. So they were extended an offer by a company that said, hey, we will employ you. We've got the room, we've got the space. And within 1 calendar year, those same companies are saying, oh man, we never could have seen this coming. We grew too fast. We're going to have to let you go. In no world is it the fault of the employee that they get free coffee. In no world is it the fault of the employee that they get a ping pong table in their office and the ability to work from home. It's 2022. Working from home is going to increasingly be standard, and in a decade, it's going to be the default. Workers deserve better all across the country, and that doesn't exclude people just because they're paid decently okay. And it doesn't exclude people because their politics don't align with yours. Just because someone has a different political opinion than you doesn't mean that they don't deserve workers' rights. They're workers' rights. The glaring exception here being cops, whose full-time job is to use violence to force you to stay in line. If workers organize and strike and demand more, guess who's called in to break up the protests? So once again, as with all of history, labor unions, yes. Police unions, fuck off. At one point, this was a video about Twitter. My point is this. I am grateful for being paid decently well. I am grateful for the random perks that I get. I get a nice piece of merch every once in a while from my employer, and we get decent time off, I guess, for America. Like, it's still garbage compared to the rest of the world, but yeah, generally, the tech industry is a bit better to its employees, kind of, but it's still a meat grinder. The number of people that I know in this industry who actively want to not be in this industry anymore just because of how morally painful and just constantly grindy it is, it's out of control. You ask any person in tech what their exit strategy is, and they've got one. And if they don't, I can guarantee you they're like in their early 20s. There are industries that have it much harder than the tech industry workers, and that's for sure. But that doesn't make people not workers. We are all still selling our labor for a salary. That puts us in the same class. And unless we organize and work together and support each other to demand better workers' rights, instead of fracturing off and simping for billionaires who are firing people at will for not being hardcore enough to slave away and ignore their life for the sake of some stupid bottom line, we're never going to get anywhere. It is not about how hard you work. That is not the metric of success. And there are people in the tech industry who work way too long. It is not uncommon to see people working 16-plus-hour days every day in this industry because they believe that they have to. And that's not okay. It's not like I'm trying to take those people and use them to say, hey, no, the tech industry does work hard. No, fuck that. We shouldn't have to work so hard. We shouldn't have to do that. That is not the way that society is supposed to work. We should put in the work that we need to do to produce the value to make it worth having us as employees. And we should be paid well enough to live our lives working a normal work week. 40 hours is already more than most places in the world. 40 hours is a compromise that favors the employers. We do not need to stick to the 40-hour work week. We do not need to be working 60, 80, 100-hour work weeks. That's egregious. That should not be the metric for being a good person or deserving rights. You deserve rights inherently, and you shouldn't have to work so hard that you're working yourself into an early grave just to live okay. I want your quality of life to be better, and I want my quality of life to be better. I want all of my countrymen's quality of life to be as good as it can be, and I want you to be comfortable and happy. Be well.